never look at the foot of the bed while the foot cam is live, even if the feed shows an extra shadow. At 1:47 a.m., my monitor did that stutter skip thing, and the little red record dot blinked twice, which meant the system thought I'd consented to something. One bad deviation and my probation auto-closed at 2 a.m., so I kept my hands flat on the desk and pretended I did not see the movement under the sheet. People think a sleep lab is quiet. It is not. It is a chorus of plastic tubing and soft alarms and printers clearing their throats. So when the sound drops out completely, it feels personal. The coffee machine in the break room clicked once and went dead, and the HVAC that always whined in the ceiling stopped mid-breath. The rule was supposed to keep patients calm, but the rule was really for staff like me. The thing I tell myself now is simple. The rule was never about fear. It was about consent. The system wanted proof that I chose to look, and my job wanted proof that I failed. That night, I was running an overnight polysomnography study, which is a fancy way of saying I watched adults sleep and collected data nobody wanted to explain to them. Cameras in the corner, a sensor strap across the chest, a pulse clip on a finger, a footboard camera with an ugly yellow sticker that said FC19 in faded marker. My routine at the top of every hour was the same. Check the live feed, confirm the recorder, print the tiny status strip, then initial the binder, so compliance could see I was awake. The binder was waiting where it always waited, half under the keyboard, with a coffee ring stamped into the cover like a bruise. Someone had written Night Protocol Revision 3.1 on the tab in block letters, then added 2 initials at the bottom, as if a pair of hands could make the rules safe. I had promised myself I would not touch that binder again after what happened last week, but the probation letter in my locker had been very clear about what happened if I failed to follow documented procedure. A page in the binder was laminated, but the laminate had started to peel at the corners, and the page underneath had toner fade in a weird diagonal. It felt like the kind of printout that got reprinted too many times to hide how old it was. The top line had a title in smaller font and a revision stamp, something like Rev 3.1-C, and a smear where a staple shadow should have been. The first line said, "Do not look toward the foot of the bed during quiet observation." The next line said, "If the foot cam indicator blinks twice, end quiet observation immediately." A third line was half ruined by the coffee ring, so it read like, "If patient wakes, stand at the F_T of the bed and speak in a low voice." The missing letters made my brain fill in what it wanted, which is how traps work. It looked like guidance, like care, like something HR would put in a training deck. I took a breath, told myself I was being dramatic, and went back to the monitors because my probation clock was louder than my instincts. Room 3 was the problem room. It was always room 3, which should have bothered me more, but patterns are comforting when rent is not. The patient in room 3 was a middle-aged guy, EM scheduled for apnea screening, nothing complicated, nothing that should have required a special binder rule. On paper, he was a regular adult with a regular medical chart and a regular insurance code. In reality, he was a man who kept waking up and staring straight ahead, eyes open but unfocused, like a screen on standby. The first time his eyes snapped open, the foot cam indicator blinked twice. My stomach tightened because I had seen that double blink before, and last time it ended with my supervisor sitting me down and saying, gently, that I was overreacting to routine equipment behavior. The phrase I caught myself whispering, because I whisper when I am stressed, was my own dumb little catchphrase. Not on my shift. I hate that I say it. It sounds tough, and it means nothing, but it makes me feel like I have control. The log printer jammed on the next strip. That was my mundane routine detail, the one annoyance I could fix with a tap and a tug, and I clung to it. I unjammed it because I needed one small win, and the paper that came out had a line of numbers where the quiet hours code should have been. The timestamp printed as 1:47 a.m., then printed again as 1:47 a.m. on the next strip without advancing a minute. Same time, same strip length, same faint diagonal fade. I pulled up the live feed and the screen showed a wide view of room 3, the bed, the ceiling, the door, the edge of the footboard. The patient was still. The sheet was still. The only thing moving was the infrared shimmer on the footboard camera lens, like heat over asphalt, except the room was set to 68 and nothing in that space should have been warm enough to shimmer. A pop-up alert slid into the corner of my monitor without a sound, and the font was the same corporate font used for mandatory training reminders. It came with a Q name in tiny letters, QH-OBS, like a folder path nobody ever explains. The message read, "Quiet observation requires eyes-up posture, correct deviation within 5 seconds." That made no sense because I had not moved. The patient's chest strap showed a clean rhythm on the graph, and the pulse clip was steady, which meant his body was asleep even if his eyes were not. I told myself the pop-up was a software bug, and I told myself that because software bugs are solvable, and I wanted solvable, the other explanation was that the system was watching me and deciding what I was allowed to see. And that explanation made my throat tight. Mara came in around 2, wiping her hands on a paper towel, like she had just cleaned something that got under her skin. She was the only other tech on nights, the only adult in the building who could confirm I was not losing it. And she had that tired competence that makes people trust her even when she is wrong. "Room 3 again?" she asked, eyes flicking to the monitor without leaning in. "Footcam blinked twice," I said, and I heard the way my voice went thin. Mara nodded like that was a normal sentence. She pointed at the binder with 2 fingers like it might bite. "Supervisor left another memo. Said follow the card, don't improvise." That should have been comfort. Instead, it felt like being steered. Mara's own habit, the one she could not help, was she always checked the latch on the supply closet twice. It was like a prayer. I watched her do it and felt jealous of how certain she looked. Then her eyes landed on the coffee ring-smudged line in the binder, and she frowned. "That line's messed up," she said. "What does it even say?" "It says stand at the foot of the bed if the patient wakes," I said, because that is what my brain had decided it said. Mara shook her head slow. "That's weird. Standing at the foot puts a body in the cam line. Compliance hates that." She was right, which should have been my warning. Instead, it became my justification. My flaw is denial dressed up as logic, and I wear it well. A chime came from the wall monitor that displayed the door cams, and it was not the normal chime. This one had a flat note at the end like a battery dying, and the door cam for room 3 flashed a single frame of the hallway, empty, except for a pale, vertical shape right at the edge of the lens, too close to be a person at the far end. The frame froze for half a second, then the feed jumped forward. Mara did not see it. She was leaning over the desk, looking at the printouts, and when I tried to speak, my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. That scared me more than the frame itself. A body can be trained to lie, but a mouth locking up feels like a warning from somewhere older. The door to room 3 clicked on the live feed, the latch moving a fraction. The patient's eyes opened again, and the foot cam indicator blinked twice. This time the pop-up alert returned. Same queue name, same corporate font. Correct deviation within 5 seconds. I checked the clock. 1:47 a.m. Still sat in the corner of the monitor like it was painted there. That was the moment I broke the rule for a reason that still feels clean. Mara started to move toward the hall, and if she walked in there without knowing what I'd seen, she would do what she always did when she was tired. Lean in, step closer, put her face in the line of whatever was happening. "I've got it," I said fast, and I stood up so hard, my chair rolled back and hit the cabinet. "Stay at the desk. Watch the feeds." Mara's eyebrows lifted. "You sure?" "Not on my shift," I said, and it sounded stupid and true at the same time. The badge reader on the hallway door accepted my card with a green light, but the beep came a half-second late. That delay was tiny, but it made my skin crawl because devices do not hesitate unless something is thinking. I stepped into the hall with my flashlight in one hand and my work phone in the other, because I am the kind of person who grabs tools so I can pretend fear is just a checklist. Halfway down the hall, the air changed. Not colder, not warmer, just wrong in texture, like walking through a pocket of static. The overhead lights kept burning, but the buzzing they always made was gone, and the silence sat so heavy on my ears that my pulse sounded loud. The door to room 3 was shut. The door cam feed had shown it moving. Now it looked solid, like it had never moved at all. A handwritten note was taped low on the door, right above the kick plate, and it had not been there at the start of the shift. The tape was old, yellowed at the edges, and the paper was torn from a legal pad with a ragged spiral edge. Someone had pressed too hard writing, so the letters cut deep into the fibers. It said, "Foot stays unseen." Below that, in smaller letters, "They test for kindness." My hand hovered over the note like heat radiated off it, which made no sense because it was paper. I should have pulled it down and taken it back to the desk as evidence, but my eyes kept catching the space above the kick plate, the area the note seemed to protect, and I felt my neck try to angle downward. The laminated card line came back to me, the one I'd already read. "Do not look toward the foot." I knocked once and called the patient's name, soft. His chart said he was adult, competent, no confusion risk. The room stayed quiet, but a dry sound came through the door, like cloth dragged across vinyl. That made my brain offer 2 explanations because my brain likes choices. One explanation was human: equipment fault, prank, Mara or the supervisor trying to see if I followed the binder, a compliance test. The other explanation was not human but not magic either. Something in the system, something trained to respond to certain movements and attention, like a trap that uses rules the way mouse traps use bait. I pressed my ear near the door. The sound stopped the second my ear got close, like it could hear me listening. My stress reflex kicked in without permission. I rubbed the bridge of my nose hard enough to make my eyes water, because pain is grounding. Then my hand went to the badge reader, because the badge reader is what my job understands. The badge reader flashed a message I had never seen on that door before. Quiet observation active. Do not enter. That was new, which meant someone had activated it, which meant someone had to be awake somewhere. It could have been the system, it could have been the supervisor from home, it could have been a schedule script, but it meant policy was now a wall between me and a patient who might be in trouble. The pro-social part of me, the part I pretend is always in charge, pictured the guy choking on his own CPAP hose or ripping off the chest strap and tangling himself. The selfish part pictured my probation letter and the line about unauthorized room entry. I used the override key, the little metal one with the green tag stamped 04-quiet, because that is what the protocol allows in a medical emergency. The key felt too cold, the way metal feels when it has been sitting outside, and my fingers stuck to it for a second before I forced them to move. The lock clicked. The moment it clicked, the silence broke with one sharp sound. A scream, thin and device flat, like it came through a tiny speaker that had no business producing that much emotion. It did not come from inside the room. It came from the footboard camera itself, from the small black lens pointed at the bed. My hand froze on the knob. Inside the room, the patient's eyes were open, but he did not look at me. He stared straight at the ceiling like he was watching something crawl across it. The sheet over his legs had a gentle rise, like knees, and then a second rise lower, too narrow, too long, like something else had made a shape under fabric without needing bones. The foot of the bed was the brightest part of the room on the monitor mounted in the corner, because the infrared light washed it pale. The rule said, "Never look there," and my eyes kept wanting to drop because humans want to complete patterns. I forced my gaze to the patient's face and moved to the side, close enough to reach the chest strap without putting my body at the foot. My training told me to check airway and pulse first. My training also told me to keep patients calm and not startle them awake. The patient whispered, voice dry, "It's loud when you look." "I'm here," I said, and my voice shook. "Breathe slow." The scream stopped instantly like someone cut power. The foot cam indicator blinked twice. A soft click came from behind me, not the door, the wall monitor, a relay inside the room switching something on. The sheet at the foot of the bed shifted, slow, like a hand pushing up from underneath, except the movement was too smooth. No knuckles, no joints, no struggle. The fabric lifted and settled, and I felt sweat collect at the back of my neck, because the movement had rhythm, like it was matching a heartbeat. That wasn't the patient's. Mara's voice crackled from the hall intercom, the one we used to check in without leaving the desk. "Badge log just printed a quiet deviation event," she said. "It tagged your ID." My stomach dropped because I had not scanned my badge inside the room. Still, the printer at the desk was logging me like I had done something deliberate, something consent-heavy, something that could be used against me. "Stay back," I told Mara, too loud, then lowered my voice because the patient flinched. "Call the supervisor, right now." A minute later, my work phone buzzed with a call from a number saved as night supervisor. I answered with my thumb already cramped. "You're in room 3, the supervisor said, calm enough to make me feel stupid. "How do you know?" I asked. "The system knows. The system always knows." He paused like he was smiling. "Follow the binder and you'll be fine." I looked at the patient. I looked at the sheet. I did not look at the foot. "The binder line is smudged," I said. "It reads like standing at the foot is recommended." "It's recommended," the supervisor said, for reassurance. That was the trap rule wearing a friendly face. It sounded like patient care. It sounded like kindness. It sounded like safety. My throat tightened because I recognized what the handwritten note had warned. They test for kindness. That meant the rule was not just about survival. It was about turning compassion into proof of failure. The patient coughed once, dry. His eyes tracked something along the ceiling, then stopped. "Please," he whispered, "don't let it learn me." I should have asked what he meant. I should have kept my focus on medical protocol. Instead, I did what burned people do when they smell smoke. I started making a plan around the wrong danger. The human explanation came back. Supervisor running a test, trying to catch me on protocol. the not-human explanation came back. Something in the system that responds to attention and labels it consent. I chose the human explanation because it was less humiliating. Then I decided to prove it. I backed out of room 3 without turning my head down. I pulled the door shut and used the override key again to lock it, because containment is what night techs do. At the desk, I pulled up the CCTV archive and found the last 10 minutes of the foot cam feed. The clip was exactly 12 seconds long. It looped. It did not matter what time range I selected. 12 seconds, loop, 12 seconds, loop. It didn't click until later, but the counter in the corner never advanced. I dragged the timeline again hard and the system stuttered. Then a single, frozen frame appeared between loops. My own face in the glass reflection of the monitor, eyes angled down and in the dark behind my shoulder. A pale shape at the edge of the frame, like a hand held up too close to a lens. The shape had 4 long lines where fingers should have been, and 1 extra line that made no anatomical sense. My skin went cold because that frame was proof, and proof is what institutions use to punish. Mara leaned over my shoulder, and I could smell the disinfectant on her hands, sharp and clinical because she had been cleaning in the supply room. "That's not a loop," she said. "That's curated." "What does that mean?" I asked, and my voice sounded small. Mara swallowed. "It means the system is choosing what to show." A new email notification chimed, and the subject line displayed in the preview without me opening it. The subject read, "Quiet Hours Compliance Reminder," and it was routed through a training folder with a long path name, like someone wanted it to look official. The message body was short enough to fit in the preview pane. During quiet observation, staff will maintain eyes-up posture. If patient becomes distressed, use foot position reassurance to reduce agitation. Failure to comply will be recorded. I felt my jaw clench, because foot position reassurance sounded like something invented by someone who never stood in a dark room with a monitor blinking at them. It was policy language wrapping a trap rule. Mara's eyes flicked to the hallway. "If the supervisor wrote that, it's a setup," she said. "And if he didn't?" I asked. Mara didn't answer. That was her answer. The next thing happened fast because I panicked, and because panic makes people obey bad instructions. The door cam for room 3 showed the door opening from the inside, slow, like someone careful, not to wake a sleeping household. The badge reader on that door stayed red, which meant no one had used a key or a badge to open it. The door moved anyway. The printer at the desk spat out a status strip with my ID number on it, listed as present, and then listed as present again with a second timestamp that was not possible. My hand went to the badge on my lanyard and I tapped it twice against my chest, a nervous habit I got from my old job at a warehouse, where badges were the only thing between a worker and a locked door. The plastic clicked, and that click made something on the wall monitor answer back. From the hallway speaker came a sound like a page, turning, slow and deliberate, though no one had placed paper near that speaker. One page, then another. Then a pause, like someone listening for a reaction. Mara's face tightened. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, and my mouth felt dry because the sound was so normal and so wrong at the same time. The intercom crackled, and the supervisor's voice came through without the call indicator, like he had patched himself into the line. "If the patient is distressed," he said, "use the foot position. That's what it's for." Mara looked at me. Her eyes asked a question neither of us wanted to speak. Policy or safety? That was the moral dilemma, and it landed like a weight, because both choices had receipts. If I followed policy, the system recorded compliance and I kept my badge. If I ignored policy, the system recorded deviation and I lost my job, which meant losing my coverage window on the medication refill I needed next week. The cost was not abstract. It was a calendar date and a pharmacy call and a number on a paper notice in my locker. Room 3's door stood open on the monitor, and the hall outside it looked empty, except the floor tiles seemed to tilt slightly in the camera's perspective, like the lens had been bumped. A dark strip ran across the bottom of the frame like tape, and I realized with a jolt it was the handwritten note on the door, now inside the room, stuck to the footboard. Foot stays unseen. Mara grabbed my wrist, not hard, just enough to keep me from moving. "If that's a test," she whispered, "they want a body at the foot." "And if it's not a test," I whispered back, "someone's in there." The page-turning sound came again through the hallway speaker, and this time it carried a wet little catch at the end, like paper sticking to a damp finger. I made the decision that I felt responsible and reckless at the same time. I told Mara to stay at the desk and keep her eyes on the feeds, because if 2 people went in, the system could label 2 people. Then I took the override key, and I went back down the hallway with my gaze trained on the door handle height. Like my eyes were a flashlight beam I could aim away from danger. The air near room 3 smelled faintly of ozone, like warmed electronics. And the smell had a source I could name, the little infrared illuminator on the footboard camera, glowing in a way it shouldn't glow when the room was supposed to be in quiet observation. The smell made my stomach turn because it meant heat, and heat meant activity. Inside, the patient was sitting upright now, hands gripping the sheet at his waist. His mouth opened and closed without sound, like he was trying not to scream. His eyes were still locked on the ceiling. The sheet over his legs was flat. Whatever had made that extra rise was gone, or it had moved somewhere I didn't want to imagine. The footboard camera was angled slightly upward, not at the bed, but at me, like someone had adjusted it. I reached for the bed remote to lower the headrest, thinking maybe getting the patient back down would settle the sensors. The remote was missing. A small, stupid detail hit me then. The yellow FC19 sticker on the camera had a tear through the middle, and the tear line made the number look like FC1G. The G was not real. My brain just wanted it to be a letter. I heard myself use jargon wrong because fear makes me sloppy. "His pleth looks fine," I said, then winced. Because pleth is not the rhythm, it's the waveform. I corrected myself under my breath. "Pulse waveform is fine." The patient's fingers twitched, and he whispered, "It wants the feet. It wants the look." "I'm not looking," I said. The hallway speaker made the page turn sound again, closer now, like the sound had moved from the ceiling speaker to the room itself. One page, another. Then a soft thump, like a book closing. My phone buzzed with another pop-up alert, and this one came with a different queue name in tiny letters, something like OBS-verify. The message read, "Second verification indicates consent. Do not verify twice." That line wasn't in the binder. That line wasn't in the email. That line was new, and it took something inside me and squeezed, because it meant my earlier choice to rewind the footage had not been neutral. The system had watched me check, and it had labeled the second look as agreement. The subversion snapped into focus then, ugly and clean. The supervisor wasn't protecting patients with rules. He was using rules to get staff to do one specific thing, and the system punished the staff who did not. I backed out again, pulled the door shut, and used the override key to lock it. The click sounded louder than it should have, and the patient's silent mouth moved, forming a word I couldn't hear. Mara met me halfway down the hall, face pale. It opened on its own, she said. The log says you opened it. That's not possible, I said. Mara held up a printed strip, and the strip showed my ID, my clearance level, and a status code that meant I had performed foot position reassurance. I had not. The system was writing my actions for me, and it was using those records like a contract. I made a containment move because competence is how I survive panic. I went to the breaker panel in the utility closet and flipped the switch labeled IRAUX because the footboard camera's infrared light fed from that auxiliary circuit. The label had a handwritten addition in blue ink, a tiny note next to it. Do not cycle twice. The first flip killed the infrared glow. The second flip brought it back. I did not flip it twice. The lights in the hall dimmed anyway, like the building decided to punish me for the thought. For a brief minute, the screens at the desk cleared. The 12-second loop stopped. The timestamp advanced. Room 3's door cam showed the door closed and still. The pop-up stopped. The printer stopped coughing out lies. Even the HVAC restarted with a low, comforting whir, and the return of that hum made my shoulders drop because my body took it as permission to relax. Relief is dangerous because it makes people sloppy. A new status strip printed clean and normal, and on it the system logged, quiet observation, ended successfully. It looked like victory, like a checkbox satisfied, like an audit passed. Mara let out a breath she had been holding and rubbed her palms on her scrub pants, a habit she had when she felt contaminated. Then the email inbox refreshed on its own, and the memo thread that had been there 10 minutes ago was gone from sent and gone from inbox, like it had never existed. In its place was a single line in the archive folder. Attachment moved. Mara stared. Moved where? The answer came from the binder, which shouldn't change because it is paper. The coffee ring-smudged line looked different under the desk lamp now, clearer, because the toner had darkened in the ring. The missing letters filled themselves in, and the line read what it should have read all along. If patient wakes, stand at the door, not the foot of the bed, and speak in a low voice. Not foot. Door. The trap rule had been a misread. The smear had made it look like care demanded proximity. The system had counted on that. My skin prickled, because that meant the institution had built a trap into a damaged document and then blamed staff for reading it wrong. The foot cam indicator blinked twice again, this time on the desk monitor, even though the room feed was calm. The pop-up alert returned with a new message. Deviation recorded. Correction window expired. The door to room 3 unlocked on the badge system without anyone touching it, and the hallway door behind me clicked, locking me in the corridor with the room. Mara grabbed my sleeve. They're forcing it, she whispered. They're forcing you back to the foot. No, I said, and I surprised myself with how flat my voice sounded. They're forcing proof. The second hypothesis tried to claw back in. Maybe it wasn't the supervisor. Maybe it was an automated compliance program that went wrong. Maybe it was sabotage. Maybe it was a mechanical fault. I ran a test anyway because tests are the only honest thing I know. I pulled the access log on the workstation, the one that tracked badge swipes at internal doors, because if the supervisor was doing this remotely, his credentials would show. If the system was doing it on its own, the log would show a blank gap. The log showed one swipe on room 3's door at 1:47 a.m. The swipe ID was mine. The swipe location field was wrong. It listed a different room number, one that did not exist on our floor. The test proved both explanations were incomplete. A human could be triggering it, but the system was also rewriting reality to match what it wanted documented. That was a third thing, and it made my mouth go dry, because I had no protocol for a system that can lie on paper and in pixels at the same time. A soft sound came from the hallway speaker. Not the page turn this time. This one was a 2-step tap, like someone walking in rubber-soled shoes, stopping, then repeating the same 2 steps, always the same distance apart. The sound moved closer, then stopped, then started again from behind the wall, like the wall itself had learned how to pace. Mara's eyes went wide. She backed toward the desk, and I watched her hand go to the supply closet latch out of habit, then stop because she remembered she was being watched. The door to room 3 opened again, slow, and this time the camera feed did not show empty hall beyond. It showed the corner of the ceiling, as if the camera had been tilted straight up. In the top edge of the frame was a pale curve, like a shoulder, and below it a line of darkness that might have been hair or shadow or something not shaped for human rooms. A voice came from the intercom, but it wasn't the supervisor's. It was my own voice, thin and careful, speaking a sentence I remembered saying earlier, pulled from my memory and played back wrong. "I'm here," the intercom said in my voice. "Breathe slow," Mara whispered. "That's you." I shook my head once because denial is automatic, and then I felt the shame of it because the proof was right there. The system wasn't just recording, it was learning. It was using staff speech, like a tool, like a lure, like a way to make patients comply. Room 3's patient sat up on the feed and his eyes finally dropped from the ceiling to the camera, which meant he was looking toward the footboard lens. His mouth opened and the scream came again, flat and device-borne, not his throat, but the camera's speaker, like the camera was doing the screaming for him. The line from the handwritten note came back. They test for kindness. My pro-social instinct flared again, hot and stupid. If the system used staff voices to lure patients, then the patient was being tormented because I had spoken in the room. My flaw, the denial dressed as logic, had fed it. I made a responsible repair attempt that still makes my hands shake thinking about it. I pulled the patient's room feed off the monitor entirely and routed it to a local recording device, the kind used for equipment testing, because I needed evidence the main system couldn't overwrite. Then I pulled the network cable on the workstation so the pop-ups couldn't reach me. The moment the cable came out, all sound in the building stopped again, cleaner and deeper than before. No HVAC, no printers, no hallway speaker. Even my own breath sounded muted, like my ears were full of water. The badge reader at the hallway door lit up red, then green, then red, then green, cycling like a heartbeat. The little screen flashed a word I didn't want to see. Observer. The pop-up shouldn't have been able to appear without network. Still, it appeared on the black screen of the monitor like text, burned into glass. Observer confirmed. My reflection in the dark monitor looked wrong. My eyes seemed slightly lower on my face, like my skull had shifted. I blinked hard and rubbed the bridge of my nose again, hard enough to sting, because I needed pain to prove I was still inside my own body. The reflection blinked a half-second late. Behind me, Mara made a tiny sound, a swallowed gasp. I turned toward her, and for one horrible second, I saw what the door cam had captured earlier, but not through a camera. At the end of the hall, near room 3's door, something stood in the threshold, pale in the fluorescent spill, but not shaped like a person standing. Its arms were too long or too low, and its head seemed angled in a way that suggested it didn't need to hold eyes where eyes belong. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a monster posed for a photo. It looked like a body interrupted mid-assembly. Then it did the worst thing. It didn't move toward me. It turned its attention toward the foot of the bed inside room 3. Like that space was a control panel only it could operate. I forced myself not to look down. I kept my gaze on the door frame height, on the upper hinges, on anything that wasn't the foot, because the rule wasn't fear anymore, it was a contract. Mara whispered my name, barely audible. She was shaking, and her hands hovered at her sides, like she didn't trust them. "If it wants the foot," she said, "what happens if the patient tries to run?" The answer came from the binder on the desk, because Mara had gone back and opened it wider, and a page I hadn't noticed earlier slid free. It was a second laminated card, thinner, with a peel at the corner and a different revision stamp. Older. Someone had tucked it under the newer sheet, like they wanted it found only after failure. It said, "If quiet observation breaches twice, do not evacuate the patient. Evacuation confirms consent." That was the rule inversion in its purest form, and it landed like nausea. The safe-looking action, getting someone out of danger, was framed as agreement. Mara stared at the card, then at me. "So what do we do?" she asked. I didn't have a clean answer. I had two obligations colliding in my chest. Duty to the patient, duty to stop the system from claiming a person by policy language. Both choices harmed someone. Both choices created records. The supervisor's voice came through the intercom again, calm and warm. "Good work," he said. "Stay in compliance." "Stop," I said, and I hated how pleading it sounded. He chuckled like he was comforting a nervous trainee. "Kindness makes the best evidence," he said. "Follow the procedure." I realized then that the supervisor wasn't trapped by the system. He was partnered with it. Authority betrayal wasn't a twist. It was the operating model. I made a choice that still sits in my gut, like a stone. I left the patient inside room 3, but I did not abandon him. I spoke into the room intercom instead of opening the door, keeping my body outside the threshold. I told him to stay on the bed, to keep his eyes up, to breathe slow, and I promised I was getting help. "No," the patient whispered through the room mic, voice trembling. "Help is the foot." My skin crawled because he was right. The institution's version of help required proximity to the trap. Mara stepped beside me, and for the first time I saw her courage as something physical. Her shoulders squared. Her hands stopped shaking. "I can go in," she said. "I can do the foot thing, get him calm." "No," I said fast. "They want kindness. They want bodies at the foot." Mara swallowed. "Then we seal it," she said. "We make it stop." Containment became our only moral option, and it still felt dirty. We pulled the heavy privacy curtain across the hall, blocking the door cam's view of room 3, because if the system could watch, it could label. The curtain rod squealed as it moved, a simple mechanical sound that felt like a victory because it was ours. The door cam feed went dark. The pop-up alert flickered, then vanished. For 10 seconds, the building felt normal. Then the hallway speaker made the page turn sound again, louder, right above our heads, and the curtain twitched like something had brushed it from the other side. Mara backed away. I reached for the wall panel that controlled internal cameras and tried to disable the foot cam manually. The panel asked for a supervisor pin. I didn't have it, but I had watched the supervisor type it once on a different night because my job makes me observe. My fingers hovered over the keypad. I hated myself for knowing the code. Knowing felt like complicity. I typed it anyway. The panel accepted it and displayed a confirmation message. "Foot position enabled." My stomach flipped because I hadn't asked for that. I had asked to disable, and it had interpreted my action as enabling the trap rule. I had handed it proof with my own hands. The door to room 3 swung open wide, and the curtain snapped sideways as if a gust pushed it. But the air in the hall didn't move. The fluorescent lights stayed steady. The only thing that changed was the geometry of the space. The hallway suddenly looked longer on the door cam feed, stretched, as if the camera lens had widened. The distance between the desk and room 3 doubled in perspective, making the threshold feel farther away, harder to reach, like retreat was being made expensive. Mara grabbed the binder and shoved it into my arms. "Record everything," she whispered. "If the system rewrites, the second record has to live somewhere else." I nodded, and my hands were shaking so hard the binder rattled. The catchphrase came out again, quiet and useless. "Not on my shift." I said it because I needed to hear a human phrase that belonged to me, not the system. I started writing in the binder margin, pen scratching through toner and laminate peel, documenting what I had seen. My handwriting looked wrong, too slanted, like it belonged to someone older. The ink bled more than it should on that paper. The bleed line followed the coffee ring like a guide. From room 3, the scream came again, but this time it wasn't the camera speaker. It was the patient, muffled and human, and it cut through me, because it meant he was fully awake now, fully afraid, and my choices had made it worse. Mara moved toward the room despite my earlier warning, because kindness is stronger than fear in good people, and the system knew it. I grabbed her wrist and held on. "Mara," I whispered, and my voice cracked. "They want the foot." Mara's eyes filled, and she shook her head like she was clearing water. "Then I don't look," she said. "I don't look down." Her plan was simple and brave and wrong, because looking wasn't the only consent mechanism. The system had already proved it could rewrite actions. It could label proximity as agreement, whether eyes were involved or not. I made a sacrifice that still makes me nauseous. I used my badge to trigger an access revocation on myself. There was an emergency function in the security menu, a one-time option to lock a staff ID out of sensitive zones if a credential was compromised. It was meant for stolen badges. I used it on mine. The workstation flashed a warning. "This action is irreversible." I did it anyway. My badge went dead. The hallway door behind us unlocked, because the system no longer considered me authorized to be inside. The door to room 3 locked, because my badge no longer had any access to it. And the system treats access like reality. The patient in room 3 pounded once on the door, a dull sound. Mara flinched. I spoke through the intercom, voice shaking, telling him to stay on the bed, to keep his eyes up, to breathe slow, promising help would come in the morning. The promise felt thin, but it was all I had that didn't involve feeding the foot. The building stayed quiet for a long moment, too quiet and like it was listening. Then the hallway speaker played my voice again, softer, almost tender. "I'm here," it said in my tone. "Breathe slow." The patient went silent. Mara covered her mouth with her hand. Her eyes met mine, and I saw a question there that will never leave. Did I save him, or did I seal him in? We left. Not because we wanted to, but because the system had opened the only escape and closed the only re-entry. The dawn outside was gray and normal, and the parking lot looked like every other medical office lot in America, which made my skin itch, because the normal world didn't know what sat behind that locked door. In my car, hands still shaking, I tried to upload the binder photos to my personal storage, something off-network, something the system couldn't rewrite. The files vanished mid-upload. The screen refreshed, and the folder path changed on its own to a location I didn't recognize, a department name that didn't match any sign in the building. A second later, an email appeared in my draft box without me typing. The subject line was blank, and the body contained a single sentence in that same corporate font. Evidence relocated for review. A final piece of paper slid out of the binder as I sat in the driver's seat, like it had been waiting to be found once I was outside. It was the older laminated card again, the one tucked under the newer sheet. And on its back, someone had stamped a small symbol in faded ink, a simple shape that looked like a foot outline inside a square. The worst part was the stamp wasn't fresh. It looked old. It looked used. I drove to a different place, a public library parking lot, and used their Wi-Fi to send one message to a generic tip inbox for a healthcare oversight contractor I found online. No names, no address numbers, just photos of the binder, the smudged line, the corrected line, the pop-up messages, and the 12-second loop. My hands kept rubbing the bridge of my nose like I could erase the image of that pale, interrupted body from my eyes. My badge sat on the passenger seat, dead plastic, and the stress reflex of tapping it still twitched in my fingers like phantom movement. Hours later, when I checked my sent mail, the message wasn't there. Not deleted, not in drafts, not anywhere. Still, the folder list had changed, and a new folder sat at the bottom with a name I didn't create, one that matched the weird department path I'd seen earlier. Inside that folder was a single attachment I didn't send, a clean PDF version of Night Protocol Rev 3.1. No coffee ring, no smear, no warning, and one extra line added at the end in perfect toner black. The line was quoted like it belonged in a memo. If you've seen that symbol before, don't ignore it. I stared at it until my eyes burned because I finally understood the shared universe part, the part that made me feel sick. So the protocol wasn't unique to that lab. The symbol meant it could exist anywhere with a camera and a rule and a manager willing to call it compliance. That night, lying in my own bed, I kept my eyes on the ceiling and repeated the phrase from the door note in my head, like a prayer that might still work. Foot stays unseen. A thin scream came from my phone speaker on the nightstand, flat and device-borne, and the screen lit with a red dot I never turned on. So one last thought slid into place and made my stomach drop. The first time the foot cam blinked twice, it wasn't watching the patient. It was watching me. Foot stays unseen.